Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. I'm your DJ and host, Sam Wilson Jr., and I'm here to bring you the history genre of black music: gospel, jazz, blues, old school classic soul, old school hip hop, today's hip hop and R&B, Caribbean, Latin, Afrobeat, Afro-Latina, blue-eyed soul, disco, go-go, line dances, and the Lost 45s. So come with me as I take you on to a trip to the history genre destination of black music. Right now on the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. Welcome to a bonus episode of the Black Soul Music Experience. I'm Sam Wilson Jr., and I have a special guest on my show, and it's a Mother's Day episode. This lady that I'm about to introduce is a soprano, a music director, and voice teacher. She goes by the name Jae Z. That's JAE.CI, and her new album, American Doll, which will be released on May 15th, and her stage play, Homeward Bound, a Korean adoptee exploring belonging and belonging, which have already played here in the NYC and will be in Boston, Massachusetts on June 7th. But most importantly, she's on a mission, searching and looking for her real mother. So please help me welcome to the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Jae Carelli. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Hi, Sam. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to my podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for your quick response when I posted something on the Lineable that I wanted to do a Mother's Day episode. And you quickly responded. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay. So, as always, I try to reach out to many independent artists, to those that either they were on the major record labels or not on the major record labels. So it's my mission to reach out to some of the artists and let their light shine. So, as always, America doesn't know who you are, the world doesn't know who you are. So, let us begin, shall we? Now, where were you born?
I was born in South Korea, actually. So I was born in a little suburb around Seoul called Sungnam.
Now, were any of your family relatives in the music, or did they had regular 9 to 5 day jobs?
I'm not quite sure because I was adopted when I was very young. I was adopted into my family here in the United States when I was 6 months old. Um, and I really didn't know of any biological family at all growing up my whole life. So I grew up, a lot of my adoptive family isn't necessarily musical. My grandfather and my dad are both have beautiful voices, but no one was a musician per se. I think I have some extended family who are musicians, which is really cool on my dad's side of the family. But I don't know any biological family, so I'm not sure if they're musicians. In my file, it says that they worked in an office when around the time when I was born, but I'm not sure if my files are true. So I guess that is all to be determined.
Now, when you were adopted, which high school did you go to in the NYC?
Oh gosh, so I went to actually three different high schools. I grew up in New Jersey, in northern New Jersey, and I lived in Vernon. I first started going to Veritas Christian Academy, and I went there for a year. And then I went to Walk Hill Valley High School in Sussex County, and I went there for a year. And then my family moved up to Massachusetts, and I finished out my last 2 years of high school on Cape Cod at Bourne High School.
And which college did you go to?
So after I graduated from high school, I went to the Boston Conservatory, and after I think it was a year or so, Berklee College of Music bought Boston Conservatory, and the two schools merged. So I technically graduated from the Boston Conservatory at Berklee. So at first, I was not. I really didn't know what this school merger would entail. And it was kind of confusing at first, but Berkeley has so many resources that over my time there, I just started to take advantage of. So it was a really, really cool experience to get the classical conservatory side of things, as well as all of the incredible resources that Berkeley has to offer that are not just strictly classical conservatory music training, which was really cool.
And what was your major in college?
I studied vocal performance, so classical vocal performance. A lot of that would entail, a lot of things from operas, not necessarily all operas, but classical singing.
And who did you want to be when you grow up?
When I grew up, I wanted to be, I was young and I had just started playing the flute. I hated music when I was very, very young. I wanted to be a painter like Thomas Kincaid. But then when I started listening to orchestral music, I was probably 9 or 10. And my flute teacher, God rest her soul, Karen Klein. I studied with her when I was young and I studied private flute lessons with her. And she had a student who ended up in the Boston Pops and the Boston Symphony Orchestra, Elizabeth Osling. And I really, really wanted to grow up to be just like Elizabeth and play in an orchestra. But I guess life had some different plans for me.
Now, how old were you when you started playing musical instruments?
My mom really wanted me to start piano. I was around 5 years old when I started piano lessons, and me and my dad would take lessons together, which was really great. But I hated the piano. Um, I really hated the piano. And then I started playing flute when I was around 9, almost 10. And then my mom wanted me to learn harp, and I was like, sure, mom, whatever. And I started learning harp when I was probably around like 11. And I took a couple voice lessons here or there. And then it came to a point where instrumental lessons were really expensive. My dad lost his job in the recession, and I couldn't take lessons for quite some time. So I had to turn to singing because that was the only instrument I could get for free, was my voice. So I started to sing, and it was really bad at first. But I had a really amazing, kind teacher, Heidi Schmidt, who essentially gave me lessons for free for a year. And something happened. I was probably around a freshman in high school at that time. So music was definitely a part of my childhood.
Was being a musician and an educator your calling?
I feel like it is now. When I was younger, I thought maybe I wanted to be maybe a doctor or a writer. When I was very young, I wanted to be a painter. Um, but now I can see the role that music has played in my life. And also, yes, I love teaching so much, is so near and dear to my heart. And in a lot of capacity, yes, I would say that it is my calling to help people learn how to use their voice in a way that is authentic to them.
Now, here's a question I forgot to put down. Growing up, who were some of your favorite singers and musicians?
So when I was very young, my grandmother and I, we would listen to Josh Groban. She would put Josh Groban on, and we would clean the house or cook dinner. And I think that was what really put like not like classical voice, but that was like my little gateway growing up. I was probably like 3, 4, 5. Um, and Josh Groban was pretty much and Charlotte Church, like those popera crossover singers of the early 2000s. that was the music that I really listened to growing up as a child. And then I started listening to orchestral music and classical music. When I was a little older, I was probably like 13, I started listening to like Taylor Swift, and Avril Lavigne, and some other singers. But growing up, it was really just like, especially Josh Groban and Charlotte Church were the artists that I listened to.
And who were your musical influences that had inspired you to sing or play the instruments?
I would probably have to say my biggest musical influences were my teachers. My teachers really formed and shaped me and gave me opportunities, especially my flute teacher. I did some of my first gigs with her, and my harp teacher as well. I studied harp with a lovely harpist named Artis Cavin for quite some time, and I did like my first gig at the Fort Lee Library with her. I played weddings. I was probably like 12, 13, 14, and even though I was probably taking lessons very inconsistently with my dad being in and out of work at that time, my teachers were still as flexible as they could be, and they really saw opportunity for me. So they really shaped a lot of my musical influences. And then I got more into like, just like listening to Taylor Swift growing up when I was like in middle school. And I think that's when I wanted to be a songwriter. But I was like really too scared to pursue it at that point. However, that was also a big uh, influence for me, was like, oh, you could also write songs too.
Hmm. Now, let's talk about your career as a musician or director. It was a group called the Freetones. Was that the group you founded?
I did not found this group. So we're a group and we advocate for the educational rights of the students at iBrain, which is a school for students with brain injuries and disabilities. So we advocate for them. We put on concerts. We do educational outreach. So we just sang at this gala at the Central Park Boathouse for the students, and we were celebrating and lifting up these incredible students who have brain disabilities or injuries, and it was just such an incredible event to be able to sing for them and for their families. So, yes, I did not found the group, but it has been an absolute joy to be able to work and direct my a cappella group. There's four of us, and we're all very close, and I'm really grateful for each one of the members of my a cappella group and for the mission that we work with.
And how old were you when you became the music director slash minister of music at Bethany Congregational Church in East Rockaway, New York?
I've been there for about a year and a half now at Bethany. I started music directing at churches when I was around 21. Um, I when I was living in Massachusetts, when I was living in Boston, I worked as a musician in the church oftentimes. So that was, especially like when I lived in Massachusetts, that was my main job. So I moved from Boston to New York in almost 2 years ago in the summer of 2023. And so I left a lot of churches where I worked behind, because I did want to pursue more of a performing and recording career here in New York. But I did really miss working in ministry, so I went on Indeed, and this church was like looking for a music director and a music minister. So I applied, and they're just such an amazing community. Bethany Congregational Church is really, it's a spiritual family for me, and I'm really grateful to be with them. So I've been with them for almost 2 years, and I'm really grateful I found that opportunity on Indeed.
Now, how did you came up with the name Jay Z? That's JAE.CI. I was sharing that to the audience. How did you came up with that stage name Jay Z?
That's a great question. So my legal name is Jillian Elizabeth Corelli, and I really don't go by Jillian anymore. And I remember I was always my history teacher, my sophomore year. He would always call me JC, just my initials, JC. And he would always encourage me to speak out and, share my opinion. And he, I was just kind of going through a rough time, and he noticed that I got quiet. And I remember him saying, "Yo, JC, what's up? Why are you quiet? Are you okay?" And that really meant the world that he noticed, and that he noticed that I wasn't sharing my voice, I wasn't sharing my opinion, even though at the time our political ideologies were quite different. He still encouraged me to speak out, and he still encouraged me to advocate for what was right. And he noticed when I wasn't using my voice. So, yeah, I always used my initials JC. And then I was like, oh, I learned more about just Korean language, and I learned that the romanization of the Korean syllable J is the romanization is also spelled as Jae. And I was like, oh, that's better than Jay. It just felt a little more authentic to my Korean identity, especially growing up. I didn't really have a lot of connection to Korean culture or Asian cultures at all. So it was really meaningful for me to be able to assume that name. And also, too, if you just take Jillian Elizabeth Corelli and you just take away some letters, you're left with JAE from JA from Jillian, E from Elizabeth, and then CI from Corelli. So it is just a shortening of my name.
I'm in the same situation like you, but mine was a little different. And me, I'm originally from the village of Harlem in New York City
Mm-hmm.
and lived on West 139th Street between 5th and Lenox. And I was born in Sydenham Hospital on
Mm-hmm.
Manhattan Avenue and West 122nd Street. Although the hospital is no longer there, but the building is still is, so it's now a residence home for the seniors, named after my last name, Wilson, but not related to another Wilson. But
Oh.
me growing up, after my parents were divorced in the summer of 1969, I never got a chance to get to know my black culture. And my late older sister and my late mother, had moved me to the Bronx. So I never get a chance to get to know my black culture, and me coming from the village of Harlem, known as the Black Renaissance, home of the world famous Apollo Theater and the Studio Museum in Harlem. And every August it's Harlem Week. And getting to be moved to the Bronx and not getting to know my identity, so I was moved to the Bronx. And my late mother was from the state of Virginia. So she and her parents and her cousin on her late father's side of the family have moved to the NYC. While her cousin lived in the village of Harlem, my mom and her parents moved to the Bronx. They lived on East 168th Street between Fulton and 3rd Avenue, where the 3rd Avenue L used to be. And yes, my mom had two more siblings that were born in the Bronx. That was her brother and sister. That's my maternal aunt and my maternal uncle. And they had a dog named Rex. So, as I said, not getting to know my black culture and been moved around the Bronx a lot, and I mean lots of times. I have lived on the west side of the Bronx, lived on Harrison Avenue, lived in those apartments that, you know, back then it was like split in two pathways. Today, when I went back there in 2020 during the pandemic, the building is now owned by NYCHA. So I've been
Oh.
moved to the east side of the Bronx in Parkchester, and then by that time, my mom dated this guy from Chicago, Illinois, and never told me about this story until 2009. So
Wow.
then me and mom moved back to Harlem in May of 1972. We have stayed with her friends. We lived in the projects for a while on Fifth Avenue between West 112th and West 115th Street. And then by the end of 72, moved into the new year of January 1973. We moved back to the Bronx, but we lived further up. We lived in the Wakefield section of the Bronx, and we lived on East 226th Street between Bronxwood and Barnes Avenue in the Wakefield section, almost near Westchester County.
Oh,
And we lived in a two-family house. There was a Jewish family that lived upstairs, and then by the spring of 1973, they moved out, and there was a new family moved in. It was a black family, but they were not from America. Their accent was different. So that's when I found out later they were from Jamaica, West Indies. So while my mom was working overtime, double time, she once worked at Lincoln Hospital on Bruckner Boulevard and Southern Boulevard, right near St. Mary's Park. And then later in 1972, she worked at Jacoby Hospital, which was part of the Bronx Municipal Hospital Center in the Bronx, right off of Pelham Parkway. And she worked overtime, double time, triple time. And yes, the family were my babysitters. And yes, sometime my maternal grandmother would come up and take care of me while my mom was working, making sure that everything was taken care of, do the household chores, go with my granny to help her out, go to the store, make sure everything has been taken care of. And then by 74, my mom had let this guy in and became my future stepfather. And he was from Jamaica. So I was introduced to some Caribbean music, you know, Bob Marley and Gregory Isaacs and the Mighty Sparrow, just to name a few. And before that, my mom would drop me off at her parents', my maternal grandparents' apartment. I was into some Motown and Atlantic Records and then Stax Records, which includes the late Isaac Hayes. My late grandfather had the LP called the Isaac Hayes Movement. He was influenced by the symphony orchestra, or we call it symphonic soul. So he would do cover songs from the original artist. He would take that song and stripped it and stretched it as far as wide as the eye can see. My grandfather had the LP called the Isaac Hayes Movement. I looked at that album cover and I said to myself, is Isaac Hayes swirling in a bowl of cream of wheat? And I looked at the back album cover and I see him dressed up, sunglasses, and I said, is he blind or cross-eyed? And he was wearing that black and white strip suit. And then when I opened up the album cover, it was his shades and chains. And that was his trademark. He did a cover song of something by the Beatles and I Stand Accused from the late Jerry Butler. He would take those songs and made it from a 3 minute to a 12 minute, 13 minute song. And I would say to myself, stop with the talking, get to the singing. And then I got exposed to it. So that was the birth of egoistic raps. They would talk or rap and segue into the song. And my late maternal aunt, I was dropped up by her apartment in the Bronx. It was gospel music all day, whether it's James Cleveland, Shirley Caesar, gospel choirs and quartets. And then I was dropped off at my mom's friend's house. They were listening to Philadelphia International Records. They had the OJs, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes with Teddy Pendergrass, the Three Degrees, the Futures, and later Lou Rawls and the Jones Girls and their house band MFSB. That's the house band known for TSOP. That's the theme from Soul Train. So I was dropped off by everybody. And then my late paternal aunt, from her first husband, we were listening to some African music.
hmm
And yes, my mom's coworker was Afro Latina, so I was introduced to some Latin music. So I listened to Tito Puente or Santana or Mongo Santa Maria. So I was dropped off by everybody and listening to all types of music. So as I said, I've been moved around the Bronx a lot and then later moved to Rylander Avenue between Stillwell and Eastchester Road. I lived at 1545 Rylander Avenue, then moved to the Baychester section, and then moved back to the Wakefield section again. So I've been moved around a lot. So I get what you're thinking,
Hmm.
moved around the states and everything. So you and I have something in common. We were both moved around, but when we listen to different music, whether it's classical or symphony or soulful, which they were influenced by so many artists, I can tell you that I've been influenced by some of the radio DJs. I've been influenced by Frankie Crocker,
Hmm.
and he would play anything on his show when he was on WBLS FM. He would play anything. He didn't care if it was white, black, Latino, Asian, Caribbean, Native American, or LGBTQ. He knew that if the song fits, it would fit his show. And me growing up, I thought all the singers were black. But when I watched them on American Bandstand or Soul Train or The Midnight Special or Solid Gold or Saturday Night Live, I was like, oh, they're white. Or another different ethnic background. So I was like, well, I didn't care for that. But, they were soulfully good. So it was like, mm-mm-mm. You never know. As we always say, God doesn't make no mistakes. Soul has no color. So once you listen to the music and then you'll feel it. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Music is a very
Now,
universal language.
yes, yes. Now, let's talk about your new album, American Doll, which will be released on May 15th, and it's a concept album. Please share with our audience what the concept album is all about.
Absolutely. So, this is my debut album. I am so excited. And there are 7 tracks that explore the 7 core issues of adoption. So, those issues are rejection and abandonment, loss and grief, trust and intimacy, shame and guilt. Um, then there's loyalty and family. Sorry, I'm just trying to go through all of them. Identity and belonging. Um, And then what's the last one? I always forget the last one. So I go through all of these issues, and each track explores one of those issues. And it's the 7 core issues of adoption. I believe there's a book on it, and it's about how, all humans experience these issues, but especially within the adoption constellation. So, biological parents, adoptive parents, and especially the adopted child experience these issues in a very specific way. And me being an adopted person, I wanted to share my experiences navigating these issues. So there's one track for each of the 7 issues, and I definitely have broken free from a lot of my classical upbringing with this album. So some of them they're a little more ambient songwritery tracks, and then some of them they incorporate more of like a blues, swing, jazz vibe as well. My single American Doll, the title track, is currently released on streaming platforms, and that one definitely has much more of a bluesy, jazzy vibe to it, which was so, so, so great to make. There's another track called Born Anew, which explores the issue of shame and guilt. And that one also has, I worked with my friend, my amazing vocal producer, Bia Go, and we tried to almost get like gospel choir background vocals for everything. So she helped me produce all of that. And my wonderful producer Robbie Aceto has been fantastic in just like making this whole project happen and come together and engineering our sessions. So it was really meaningful for me to record this album over the past few months and make these songs come to life that really tell the story of my adoption. Um, American Doll is out now, and that explores the issues of control and mastery within adoption. And it explores how I used to use like substance abuse to control my emotions. Gratefully, now I am sober, and I'm so grateful for that. However, I often tried to navigate a lot of my adoption trauma with self medication. And so that song explores that aspect and that issue of my adoption. I just released another single yesterday called Electric Connection, and it explores identity and belonging and how I used to self abandon. And look for belonging in other people, but then I needed to learn how to find belonging and identity within myself. Um, so I'm very, very excited. The whole album will be coming out next Thursday on the 15th. That's the day my brother was adopted, my youngest brother. I'm the oldest of five siblings. All of us were adopted from Korea. All of us from different biological families, except my youngest two siblings, are biologically related. And May 15th is my grandfather's birthday, and it's also the day that my brother came to this country. How many years ago? 14 years ago. So, yeah, it's really, really, it's a very special day. So I'm really excited to be releasing my album that day.
Well, I got a chance to check out your debut single. It's now on iTunes, as you just mentioned. The single came out, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of your album when the whole album drops real soon. And yes, since this is a concept album, it kind of reminds me of the late Marvin Gaye. His LP, What's Going On, which was released back in 1971, that was a concept album. He talked about everything, dealing with the war in Vietnam, police brutality, problems in the black community, and the environment or climate change. And that's what he said in his concept album. And I can tell you, when Berry Gordy Jr., the founder of Motown Records, found out that Marvin Gaye was going to do a protest album, he was saying, "Why you want to do a protest album? You should be doing a love album." But this was Marvin Gaye's story. His brother have served in Vietnam. What you see in the urban areas when me growing up, you seen all of the buildings in urban decay, all abandoned. That was me growing up when moved to the Bronx in the 70s. I've seen so many buildings have been decayed, burned down, and everything. You have problems in the black community, dealing with police brutality. You're dealing with some of the things that's been happening, what's been happening during the 80s. Every time I think of George Floyd or Eleanor Bumpers or Michael Stewart, the victims of police brutality, and that sparkled the Black Lives Matter movement and then Asian Lives Matter movement. This was something that Marvin was talking about. And what are the problems that we face? And also the climate situation that we're dealing with now. Marvin had put it all in that concept album. What it was 54 years ago, it is still happening today. So I see in your situation, dealing with adoption and so many things, peer pressure, that really tackles the youth and, yes, during the generation. So I'm very delighted. I'm looking forward to listening to your single when it drops, and looking
Thank you.
forward to your album. Now, speaking of that, let's talk about your stage play called Homeward Bound, a Korean adoptee exploring the longing and for the belonging. Now, I've been told that it was played here in the NYC already, correct?
Yes.
And it will
So,
be going to Boston, Massachusetts on June 7th. Tell us
yeah.
about that play that you have written about.
So it's like a concert type of play. It is. So I took being a classical singer. I had a whole, I wanted to do initially a concept recital because my senior recital was canceled during COVID, so I never got to give my recital. So I wanted to do a recital that explored the seven core issues of adoption. So there are all of these classical pieces that I wanted to sing. A Samuel Barber piece, Knoxville Summer of 1915, some of the arias from the opera Susanna by Carlisle Floyd. I also work with living composers who are my friends and colleagues who composed me. I commissioned some pieces for them. I sang a song cycle by this composer, Tom Chipulo. I did a master class with him back in school. And I wanted to explore the seven core issues of adoption through these pieces because they do explore themes of family and identity and rejection and abandonment. And but then I wanted to tell the stories to contextualize these pieces. So, and considering that my whole album is on also the same theme, it's a crossover show. So I'll go from one classical piece, I'll tell a story to contextualize it, and then I'll sing a song from my album. So, and I cycle through the whole seven core issues of adoption. So I tell a bunch of stories about me growing up, being adopted, and also especially too with the news last year in September, Korea's Truth and Reconciliation Committee uncovered a whole system of fraud within the adoption industry, especially in Korea, and just overall adoption is often used as a way to separate families, especially here in the US too. There's like the movement for family power advocates for especially families of color who are torn apart by the adoption system and the foster care system, and they will take especially children of color and black children away from their parents due to poverty rather than giving the family resources and keeping them together. So adoption overall, I'm not saying that adoption isn't appropriate in there are situations where adoption is the best option. However, overall, the system of adoption is there's so much corruption, and essentially in Korea, the government and adoption agencies were profiting off of exporting children, where they would take mothers or even kidnap children in some instances, and then put them up for adoption. And they would coerce mothers who might have wanted to keep their child, and they would coerce mothers into giving up their child for adoption, and promise that this child would have a better life. Sometimes there were cases of even families thinking that their child, the only way for their child to live was to be put up for adoption because they couldn't afford the life-saving surgery when it was actually all a lie. So looking overall at the systems of adoption and how it's been turned into a for-profit industry, which is one of the themes that I cover in my Single American Doll. And it is also what I navigate in the show, that I love my adoptive family. They are my real family. My parents are the ones who raised me. They're the ones who, even though they, didn't, my mother didn't give birth to me, she was the one who raised me, loved me, taught me. She's my real mother. But I also navigate too in the show that my biological family is also my real family too. They're all my real family. And navigating that duality of what that means. And learning to ultimately find belonging from within. That I thought that I was not worthy, and I would constantly self-abandon growing up. So the show really navigates my whole adoption story through my identity, growing up, in an Italian American family, but then, being Asian and my siblings being Asian. And then also navigating too, like these recent discoveries that have come to light and asking, well, what does this mean for me? It also navigates how I went looking for my biological family twice. My adoption agency didn't tell me for 9 months that they had found my biological mother. And they said that they reached out to her, but I I was adopted by one of the more corrupt adoption industries agencies in Korea. So I'm not sure if they're quite telling the truth. But um, yes, this whole show, Homeward Bound, it navigates how my identity crisis as an adopted person, and it criticizes the white savior complex that often silences people of color, that it promotes colonialism and nationalism and imperialism, and it also navigates how what do we do with these systems of adoption, either here in the US, international adoption, which is on the decline, but it does still happen. Um, how do we keep families together, and in situations where children don't have other family or to take care of them, or if they're orphaned, how do we place them with families and ensure that they will be safe, that they will be cared for in those instances? And how can we make adoption not, how can we change these systems so that they're not for profit and that they're actually serving the families that they need to serve? So it kind of begs all of those questions. There's a lot there. And when I go back and forth between my more contemporary sound and my classical sound, it almost highlights the contrast of me growing up as a Korean person, but in an Italian American family, and in that kind of duality, that contrast. So the switch between genres highlights that dichotomy. So yeah, there's a lot in the show, and I had a sold out show. I had a sold out premiere on last week, well, the week before. And I was just so grateful to have so many people there to listen to my story.
Now, while you're not on tour, you're a voice teacher at singing lessons and why. How long have you been teaching at singing lessons and why?
Um, yeah, so I have been with the studio for around almost 2 years, like almost a year and a half now. Um, I teach private voice lessons. Eleanor England, who is the head of the studio, she brought me on, yeah, in October of 2023, and I'm so grateful to be with this studio. It is, I've found so many amazing voice clients. It's been just a real joy to help and advocate for my voice clients, to help them find their authentic voice and to share their authentic voice and help them use it in a way that helps them sing their truth.
Now, speaking of education, and I took up music education myself. I was in private school on New York's Upper West Side and was taught by this music teacher who looked like actress Lindsay Wagner, the Bionic Woman. So I was listening to her music. And I didn't take up music education again until I went to IS 144 in the Bronx, New York. I took it up in the sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade. Then after that, I went to Harry S. Truman High School in the Co-op City section of the Bronx. I took up music education again in the ninth grade. So me growing up, I wanted to play that violin so badly when I was at IS 144, but it takes practice on how to play the violins and know your music notes. And me, I also took up music lessons. I took up piano from my private school teacher and learning the piano, but you have to practice, practice, practice if you want to be a performer on stage and not messing up the notes. And me growing up, I was just wanted to play so many other things, not just for being in concert, but just for fun.
Mhm.
So, as you, a teacher and instructor. As you know, music education is on the chopping block. So I have to ask you this question on why music education is so important.
Music education is so important. And I also think just arts in the community is so important as well. Um, the way that music is for everyone. A lot of people will tell me, "Oh, I'm not talented enough. I don't have a voice to sing." But that's the thing is, music is for everyone. Music, as we were saying before, is this universal language. Um, and music and the arts are a way that we connect with each other as people. It makes us stronger as humanity together. So that's why it's so important because if we can make music together, we can connect with each other. And in a society that's so divided today, um, it's so important to figure out how to connect with each other. And some of the best ways to do that is through sharing our stories, sharing our experiences through music. Because a lot of people might not understand my experience being adopted, but they might resonate with my song about being rejected. And then hence we find common ground. Um, and this is why music literacy is so, so, so important. And understanding that music is for everyone and it has a vital role in our communities. So, yes, understanding music literacy, music education is so important. Um, but also, music needs to take more of a community role once again. Communities used to sing together, they used to play music together, and that was more of a commonplace thing. Whereas now people will, listen to music, but it doesn't take, there are communities that are based around like music festivals, concerts, and such. But I really do hope that it makes like sharing music together, performing music together. It doesn't matter if you're good or not, because music is for everyone. So understanding music, being able to participate and having that willingness to do so, I think first an attitude needs to shift about it doesn't matter if the music you make is able to be sold or not. It doesn't matter if you are a professional level or not. Music is for everyone. And then once we as a culture and society are able to just make music for the sake of making music and connecting with each other, then music education can really take a hold. So that way people will be more inclined to pursue music. The opportunities for children to be exposed to music in school is very important. And definitely it is, we see how music education programs are on the chopping block. And unfortunately, the way right now, the public school systems have put the arts and have made the arts part of the curriculum, it's not the most sustainable for children who aspire to become professional musicians, and there is a huge socioeconomic barrier when it comes for children wanting to pursue music professionally. It requires just like the financial investment is extraordinary. And I know because when my as soon as I got a job the day I turned 16, my parents were like, all right, you need to find a job if you want to take lessons. Now that you're of legal age to work, we cannot pay for your lessons anymore. Money is really tight. And my parents were always so supportive, but it was always the financial barrier to me pursuing music. And when I see that in so many other communities, that I see people who are very talented and who work hard, but they also have come from a place of financial privilege or socioeconomic privilege, and they're able to have flourishing careers, whereas people who are just as talented and work just as hard don't have those same opportunities because of socioeconomic privilege. So it's not just about music literacy. I think it's also ensuring that we have spaces for music within our communities, no matter what your socioeconomic background. And then while promoting music literacy as well, will be really, really crucial for just for the musicians of following generations.
As I always say, music is the healing force of the world. It brings people together, soothes the minds, and soothes the souls. It moves us. It inspires us. It uplifts us
Mm-hmm.
in every single way, brings people together culturally. We learn about each other's cultures in music, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's here in the United States, all around the world, we learn from each other. And that's what music is all about. As you said it, universal. We
Mm-hmm.
learn from each other, and that's what music education is all about. I want to get to the next question since this is a Mother's Day episode. Since you were adopted when you were 4 months old, about your memories of your mom, I don't know if any of your relatives in Korea kept in touch with you or the other way around about looking for your real mother.
Yeah. So it was a closed adoption, so I had no contact with any biological family. Once my biological mother relinquished me, it was on New Year's Day, and I never had any other contact with my biological family. I actually did find a second cousin on 23andMe. She was also put up for adoption as well in the same year. Um, but I have not actually heard from her ever since we connected. So hopefully one day, I am going back to Korea in October, and I will be looking for my biological mother. Um, a lot of people have suggested I hire a private investigator while expensive. So I have to figure out how to find money for that, but it is effective. So I am, yeah. I started looking for biological family in 2019, and they said that they just couldn't locate my biological mother. She wasn't at the address where she was registered at. And I tried again in 2023, and my adoption agency told me this past September that they located her back in January, but they just didn't tell me for 9 months due to a staffing error. So they tried to reach out to her, and they said that they heard no response. But I can go through another organization who can help me do a little more of a in-person search. Um, but yes, growing up looking for like my mother has been just such my adoptive mother has been such a supportive role in my life. She was a special education teacher, and she really just has dedicated her whole life into just caring for me and my siblings. Um, she was my first musical advocate. She was the one who wanted me to have all the opportunities that she didn't have growing up in Paterson, New Jersey. And she really wanted me to be in the performing arts. So I did dance, and then music lessons like when I was younger. And then even when, my dad was in and out of work, um, my parents would ask my music teachers to barter whether my dad could either do computer work for my music teachers. My mom and I would like clean my piano teacher's house sometimes in exchange for lessons. My parents were always my biggest supporters when it came to music. Um, Even my dad was like, like, will you be able to pay off your student loans? And but he was always so supportive. At the end of the day, they were the ones who would bring me to gigs. They would bring me and my harp places. I'm so grateful for the role that my parents, especially my mom, has been in supporting my musical journey. Has always been my biggest advocate. And growing up, I said I wanted to be a painter, and I was sad that I never got like art lessons or art supplies growing up. But over the years, I've developed grapheme color synesthesia, so that's where I associate colors with letters and numbers. And I realized that my mom did give me the gift of painting through music, because now when I see music, like notated music, it's so colorful. And it's like when I play music, It's like painting. Like a C major chord is like black and red, and a D major chord is yellow and orange and green. And I'm just so grateful that my mom, really, in a very roundabout way, did give me that gift of painting just with sound instead.
You know, as I said earlier, when my parents were divorced back in the summer of 1969 and then was later moved to the Bronx, and as I said, I've been dropped off by my maternal relatives, my maternal grandparents, and my maternal aunt. And then didn't get a chance to see my paternal grandmother, not that much. So when my late paternal grandmother had once lived on West 139th Street between Fifth and Lenox, she lived in those brownstone buildings, and seeing my dad for the first time. And my late grandmother had lived, I don't know, she lived on the second or third floor because back then there was no elevators at that time. So seeing her and seeing my dad for the first time, you know, on the weekends and getting to know my grandmother and my dad for the very first time. And then by 1973, my dad was dating this lady, my stepmother, you know, didn't do that much. And, you know, he got remarried to my stepmother. I don't want to be saying the word on the air because I know my family are going to be listening to this episode. Did he say that? So, you know, I didn't get a chance to visit my dad that much because my stepmother wasn't into anything. I'm sure you heard about the Maury show and saying, "You are not the father," that type. And saying like they wanted to poison your children, you know, poison them in order to
Mm-hmm.
get the money. Because we be hearing on the news that much and not getting the love for your children. So then my dad got remarried to my stepmother, as well as my mom got remarried to my stepfather. They didn't get legally married until 1985. But my late mother had baby number three. So that was my little sister. And when when I got a chance to see my grandmother that much on the weekends, and especially when I see my dad, because he once lived on Hamilton Place and he worked for the Department of Parks. And then in 1977, he moved to St. Nicholas Avenue, right under I 95, cross Bronx Expressway before you hit the George Washington Bridge. And not seeing him that much, but when I got to the first Wilson family reunion, that was in Memorial Day 1982 in the month of May, and getting the chance to see my cousins for the very first time that I did not knew. Now, prior to that, 1974, as I said earlier, my late mother was born in Virginia. So every August, she would go to on her vacations. So it was me and mom. We traveled down to Florida. We went to Disney World. We went to SeaWorld and was on that airplane on Eastern Airlines and then dropped off at some place in another state I don't even know. Then we had to take another plane. We was on United Airlines and then we are in Virginia. So I got a chance to see some of her relatives on her mother's side of the family, representing Hampton and Newport News
Mm-hmm.
for 1 week. And then the following week, we went to Richmond and Charlottesville, visiting
Mm-hmm.
her father's side of the family for that week. And then by the time we was coming back from Charlottesville, we was on a Continental Trailways bus and getting the chance to see my great uncle. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing was that he was white. He was Greek Italian, African American. So all through the years, my late mother will always say, make sure you pay close attention because you're black, because no one's not going to hire you because you're black. And then I was thinking about whatever happened to black pride, black power. And then by the all of a sudden, when I got a chance to see her uncle, my late great uncle, for the first time, that he was white, and my late great aunt was black. So if I would have said something in front of him, and then my mom would put me to the side and just smacked me on the side, said, "You don't be talking like that. That's your relative. Apologize." So all through the years, I've been bullied. When I was moved to the Bronx, I see all the black kids. I say, "Hey, what's up? Right on." And then they'll look at you and they'll probably say, "Oh, just because you're black, but you're not black, black, black." Because when you look at my big nose and everything, then they realize that I'm not that real black. Because when I took my ancestry DNA in 2016 for my 50th birthday, I see that I am 80% African and then 20% Asia Central. That means I have relatives from Italy and Greece and the Czech Republic and the Netherlands. And yes, there's some other traits that's from war conflict countries that we're dealing with right now. I may have traces from Afghanistan and Pakistan and Jordan and Lebanon and yes, Palestine. So when I was thinking of Lebanon, I was thinking about Danny Thomas and Casey Kasem. So all through the years, when I look at my picture, my nose is big as Danny Thomas and as shiny as Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So it's like to me, like everybody is afraid of me because of these things. So I always ask myself, when I go to these family reunions, you never know who you might bump into. I have so many family relatives that's representing the ministry, the media, education, and politics. And seeing my late father's side of the family representing my grandmother's first husband from the first marriage, there's the Middleton and Wilsons. All of my relatives representing the Middletons are from Charleston, South Carolina. And my great great grandfather was a minister. He was a Methodist minister and built churches in the South. And yes, he spoke Hebrew and Greek, which I do not know. And while on the Wilsons, I have a great grandfather, but he was tall, he was slim, he's dapper, he wear those suits. And then I found out later that I'm a relative of the late Mary McLeod Bethune. She once served in the FDR administration and founded the National Council of Negro Women. And yes, one of her traits have served in politics. So you never know that I'm the cousin of Mary McLeod Bethune, and my late cousin was a member of the Tuskegee Airmen. His name is Earl Matthew Middleton. He later once worked in a barber shop, and he saved up all that money, and he formed his own business. And at the same time, he served in Congress. He was a congressman for 10 years in Orangeburg, South Carolina. So I've met some of my new relatives, one who's a musician, who's now a member of the Recording Academy, and my other cousin, she once worked at NBC. She worked at the main office in Burbank, California. She was in the children's programming department back in the 70s and 80s. And I've met so many others who are writers and people who work behind the scenes. And one of my late cousins from Connecticut, she was a councilwoman, or another name, they call it alderwoman. She had founded an organization that takes care of the homeless and those who are unemployed. So I would never believe that I'll be coming from my late father's side of the family that made America great. While on my late mother's side of the family, I only have one cousin who once worked at CBS, because I used to work at CBS, which is now Viacom CBS Paramount, which I worked there for 35 years. And my late cousin had worked for CBS for 33 and a half years when it was on Madison Avenue and East 52nd Street, and then later moved to West 52nd Street. He didn't work there. He worked at the Broadcast Center at 524 West 57th Street. And he was in charge of news film syndication, where he dropped off some newsreels to the news bureaus in London, Japan, and Beirut. And then when I found out his nephew, who was in the band Slave, the musical band back in the 70s, and then later changed to Aurora and
Hmm.
Deja back in the 80s and 90s. So I said to myself, I couldn't believe that I have a cousin who was in a group, made it back in the late 70s. So hopefully I'll get a chance to interview him real soon. So, like in your situation, getting to know or trying to find your real biological mother, and as for me, getting to know my side of the family as my late father's side of the family is growing. So, like every reunion, you never know who I may bump into. And yes, most of my relatives are married to someone outside their race. My late cousin was married to an Asian. And my other cousin, whom I haven't met yet, he serves in the military and he's married to an Asian.
Wow.
So you never know. In my family, I'm very proud to be part of that family chain. And yes, if you're married to someone outside their race, I have to show respect for everyone. And yes, even though they love some soul music too, they can get down and partay and everything.
Oh
So
yeah.
we learn from each other's cultures, and like I said, everything music is universal, brings people together, no matter what color or age or diversity or gender, wherever you're from, it brings people together.
Absolutely.
Now, here's a question I wanted to ask you. If you have written a song about your mom, what will the song be about?
I've actually written two songs about my adoptive mother and my biological mother. And it covers how one of them is called Sugar. It was the first song I ever wrote in 2020. And it was about how a few months before, I had looked for my biological mother. I drove to Toronto so I could find myself and write my letter to my biological mother. And yeah, the search was not successful. So I wrote that song during the pandemic about how my roommate, she was like, oh, I want to go make this chocolate ganache pie, but I was using all of the sugar in the house to pickle watermelon rind. So I told her I'd go to the store and buy some sugar. And it's really interesting because my mom's nickname, she grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, and she was the only white girl in her school, essentially. And really, yeah, she was pretty much the only white girl on the block. And she was surrounded by a Latin community. She was surrounded by a black community growing up in Paterson. And they always called her Sugar Baby, partially because she was white, but also because they said that her personality is just so sweet, like sugar. And it's kind of like a little nod to that and my mother's nickname growing up in school. And it explores how I was named, my Korean name was Inju, and my mother named me Jillian. And I go by neither of those names now, but it explores that dichotomy of I love my mom, but I also have these Korean roots too. Like I was named, like my Korean name Inju means pillar, kind-hearted pillar, or so my papers say, and my name Jillian means it's youthful one. So I reference like that dichotomy of like, oh, I was named this, but I was also named that. And I drove all of this way to write this letter to my biological mother, but there's no reply. And it's like this very bittersweet song. So that's the first song I ever wrote, and it explores my adoption and both of my mothers. And then I have another song called Blood in the Water, and it explores that saying, blood is thicker than water. Um, I'm There's also that saying too. I'm not sure which came first, to be quite honest, but the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. And it shows that it's kind of like an inverse of blood is thicker than water, saying that the promises you make, the people that you choose to have in your life, like that love runs thicker than any biological ties, like the water of the womb. There's debate about which saying came first or is real or whatnot, but I have found that, yes, the people that you choose to have in your life, your chosen family, like my adoptive family, those ties are still they're so important. And biological ties are important too. Like, I don't know any of my medical history. I don't know if I'm prone to, certain health conditions. I don't know where I get my eyes from. You were talking about your nose. I don't know where I get my nose from. I don't know what my biological parents look like. And that has always created like this dissonance with me growing up of like an identity crisis, that I don't look like my parents, but at the same time, my parents were the ones who raised me. So a lot of times when people meet my mom after knowing me, they're like, you're just like your mother. You talk just like your mom. And nature versus nurture, it kind of explores like that dichotomy. And this song, Blood in the Water, it starts off talking about my grandmother, my mother's mom, my mom's mother. This is the one who listened to Josh Groban. She lived with my family growing up. My maternal grandparents lived with me until they passed. And it explores how my parents, they lost their biological daughter. She was 5 months old. She was born premature. And she passed away almost exactly a year before I was born. She passed away on New Year's Eve of 1995, and I was born on December 30th of 1996. And it almost explores how we have these interesting dates. Like I was saying before, my grandfather's birthday, my mom's dad, is May 15th, and that's also the day my brother arrived in this country. He was also born on the anniversary of my paternal grandmother's death as well. So there's like all of these dates like aligning, and I'm just kind of like, well, it's kind of like all written in the stars how my family came together, and still my biological family like is important. So it explores how both my biological mother and my adoptive mother, they're both my real mothers. And it's not just one or the other, it can be both, and it is both. And I choose both of them, and I love both of them, and it's just one has a very much more active role in my life and one does not. And that's okay, and that's something that throughout the song and throughout that journey I've learned to make peace with. And I talk about my maternal grandmother. Like if anyone follows astrology, my Saturn return is coming up, and the last day for my Saturn return is actually my grandmother's birthday. So it's February 24th of next year. And I thought that was kind of like eerie. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I realized all of these birthdays and death days and all of these things kind of aligned with my siblings and our adoption. And even though we're not like biologically part of this family, it just almost seems like it was written in the stars for us to all come together and be with my family. And that was just kind of like a really interesting thing. So I explore that whole dichotomy of, is it nature versus nurture, biological family or adoptive family? And I'm like, at the end of the day, I choose all of them. And the love of that promise of my choice to love all of them is stronger than anything else.
Now, here's a question I always ask my guests: living or dead, which female singer you wish you wanted to meet or to perform with?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so many of them. To be quite honest, though, I'm really grateful. All of the singers in my a cappella group, they're all, yeah, we're a treble voice a cappella group, and they are some of the best female singers I know out there. And I have so many friends too, like my vocal producer Bia Go. Like I have just so many friends too that I get to say that I perform with some of the and work with my friends who are also some of the most incredible artists that I know as well. Um, I'm trying to think though, like a famous person. Um, you know what, Mitski? She's a Japanese American artist. Had a huge influence, a lot on my music. I started listening to her probably around like 7 years ago, and her music, since she studied composition and had a classical background, it really resonated with me. And yes, she has had like a huge influence on how I approach music. And that would kind of be crazy to be able to perform with Mitski, because she also explores like a lot of themes of identity and like longing for belonging, and that's something that I explore with my music too. So yeah, I think that would be really really cool to be able to perform with Mitski.
Now, here in the Black Soul Music Experience, I always ask my guests who is the favorite top 10 R&B black artist of all time. But since this is a Mother's Day episode, I'm about to bring you the Black Soul Music Experience top 10 Mother's Day songs of all time. Now, here's how it works. It's like a top 10, like the show America's Top 10 with Casey Kasem. We would talk about the bottom five. What was the bottom five Mother's Day song that got some airplay but didn't get that much recognition? And then we get to the top five. We get to the top five Mother's Day songs of all time, by which radio station gets a lot of airplay. And yes, most of them be playing at the clubs and many specials of all time. So we find out which of the best top five got its million sellers and everything. So I'm about to bring you the Black Soul Music Experience top 10 Mother's Day song of all time. So I'm going to list mine. So if you have any of yours, you can think about it while I do mines. Number
Okay.
10, I start with Treat Your Mother Right by Mr. T. You know, Mr. T from the A Team on NBC. He had an LP back in 1984 called Mr. T's Commandments. And the song that I played when I was at WVOX, even though it wasn't popular or get any recognition, but that was a song. It goes like this: Mother, I always love her. My
Mm-hmm.
mother. So treat her right. So that's why he was rapping. So,
Right.
like I said, it didn't get any much recognition, but I would put that song, Treat Your Mother Right by Mr. T, at number
Mm-hmm.
10. Number 9, a song called mother.A by the Pilgrim Travelers. And this was a gospel song. This was about mother who always prayed for us when we get to our destination safely and come back home safely. And she will always pray all day, all night, 24/7. So the
Mm-hmm.
song Mother.A by the Pilgrim Travelers, that song is at number 9.
Mm-hmm.
Number 8, Loves Me Like a Rock, and that song was written and performed by Paul Simon, and then later the Dixie Hummingbirds. And this song came out around 1972 or 1973. Although the song didn't become a hit for Paul Simon, but at the same year it became a hit for the gospel group, the Dixie Hummingbirds. That was a top 10 hit on Billboard's gospel charts. So it goes like this: When I was a little boy,
Mm-hmm.
and the devil would call my name, I said, who do you think you're fooling? I'm the consecrated boy, singing on the Sunday choir. My mama loves me, she loves me. She got down on my knees and hugs me, and she loves me like a rock. That was the chorus. I love that one. Even though I love the song from Paul Simon, but I prefer the one from the Dixie Hummingbirds. So I put that number 8, Loves Me Like a Rock by Paul Simon and later the Dixie Hummingbirds. Number 7, No Charge by Pastor Shirley Caesar. Now, this is a story about a son who did all the chores in order to get the allowance. So, like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, taking out the trash, 25 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Doing your chores, cleaning up, that will be 35 cents. And taking
Mm-hmm.
care of little sis, 15 cents. And he would write it up on a piece of paper. And then the mom would tell her story about no charge. It
Mm-hmm.
was telling him how to be a son, take full responsibility, and growing up to be a man, taking responsibility on your own. And they will write it paid in full. So we put No Charge by Pastor Shirley Caesar at number 7. Number 6, Grandma's Hands by the late Bill Withers. 2-minute song. He was talking about his grandmother that will be clapping hands on Sunday morning and at the same time using hands to helping those that are in need in the
Mm-hmm.
community and family wise. So I will put number 6, Grandma's Hands by the late Bill Withers. Number 5, I have a tie. So the song I put is Sadie by the Spinners, along with Better Days by jazz singer Diane Reeves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for Sadie, that tells a story about grandmothers, and that reminds me of my late paternal grandmother, my mother in law, I should say my mom's mother in law from the first marriage. Her name is Sadie Beatrice Warwick Wilson. And when I visit my grandmother a lot, she would send me birthday cards, Easter, Valentine's Day, and Christmas. She would always send me a check. And I didn't have no check and I didn't have no savings account. So mom would take me to
Mm-hmm.
the bank and put it in and deposit. So she was best known for baking cakes, and I would always, have something for lunch. Just that skip the sandwich, will have the ice cream. But she was
Mm-hmm.
always there for me. And once she had moved out of the brownstone buildings on West 139th Street, she moved to the new apartments, the Riverbend Apartments, on Fifth
Mm-hmm.
Avenue between East 138th and East 139th Street. She lived there from 1973 until she died in her sleep on April 30th, 1983. She was on her way to a church trip. And me and my mom, we went to her funeral on Friday, May 6th, 1983. It was Mother's Day weekend. And she was going to be buried. So downstairs during the repast, I wanted my mom to find out that I can go with my aunt Catherine for the burial. Because all through the years, I never knew that my late paternal grandmother was from Maryland. I thought she was from New York, born and bred. So then I had the privilege to go, and I was staying at my cousin's house, whom I never knew, which I told you earlier, from the Middleton Wilson Dix
Mm-hmm.
family. And on Mother's Day, we was listening to WPFW FM in Washington, D.C. They were playing the Mother's Day songs in the morning. And that pitched me an idea in 2014 because I was on the men's ministry. I belong to Community Protestant Church in the Bronx, New York, and I'm a church deacon. And I pitched an idea that I would do a Mother's Day CD. And I have burned over 240 CDs every single night. So it was Mother's Day songs from all genres. So that pitched in the idea. So I would put Sadie by the Spinners at number 5, along with Better Days by Diane Reeves. She would talk about her grandmother, stories about her grandmother braiding hair and telling stories from her grandmother. So I would put that a tie. Better Days by Diane Reeves and Sadie by the Spinners at number 5. Number 4 is Thank God for Mama by the Fantastic Violinaires. It tells a story about how mother will always tells us how to treat your neighbors, how to treat others. Mothers will always tell us from right and wrong, how to share, how to care, how to show respect for one another. So that was very important. So we put Thank God for Mama at number 4. Number 3, I'll Always Love My Mama by the Intruders. That's a top 10 hit. And that's from Gamble and Huff. And their slogan was There's a message in our music, there's a message in our song, so get your information from the sounds of communication. That was a top 10 hit. They would play it every day, not just on Mother's Day. And yes, they would play it at the clubs too. So when listening to the top 40 pop radio stations, they will play the 3-minute version. But when you listen to it on the black radio station, they play the whole thing, 6 minutes. And then one time they had like a 12-inch single. They would have the extended version, 9 minutes. So we'll put I'll Always Love My Mama by the Intruders at number 3. Number 2, Dear Mama by Tupac. Now, this was the first hip hop Mother's Day song. And this was written by him because not only he was a rapper, but he was also an actor. But by that time in the mid 90s, he was charged with aggravation, assault, sexual misconduct, and sexual assault. And he was in prison for a while. And then he wrote the song while he was in prison. And in case you may not know, his mother was Afeni Shakur, member of the Black Panther, and bore Tupac while she was in prison. So he wrote that song in honor of her mother. Although he and his mother didn't get along, and his father was out of the picture, absentee father, he was gone. So he was hanging out with his boys, then later moved to Oakland, California, became a member of the hip hop group Digital Underground. And then he would start singing, had some hits back then, and then later he was charged with aggravation and assault, sexual misconduct. And he wrote that song in prison. And that song became a top 10 hit. Black radio stations will play it every day, not just on Mother's Day. And that was from his LP called Me Against the World. The song and the LP has been approved by the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. at the National Recording Registry for its creativity and significance and excellence. So we put Dear Mama by Tupac at number 2. Rest in peace to rapper and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee for the class of 2017, Tupac. And number 1, A Song for Mama by Boys to Men. That's from the movie Soul Food, written by L.A. and Babyface, a top 10 hit. Mothers will always care for us, taught us from right and wrong, helping mothers out in any situation. So we'll put A Song for Mama by Boys to Men at number 1. So those are some of my top 10 Mother's Day songs. So Jay, I don't know if you have any of your favorites.
So some of these, they're songs that are special between either me and my grandmother, me and my mother, and some of them like are about mothers in like some roundabout ways. So necessarily are they Mother's Day songs? Maybe not, but they do have a very special relationship between me and my mother figures. My grandmother was probably my, since we would sing Josh Groban around the house, You Raise Me Up was always one that we would sing together. And I think about how both my, like all of the mother figures in my life, but especially my mom and my grandmother, my Mimi, they have, they just uplift me. And You Raise Me Up by Josh Groban is definitely probably one of them. And my Mimi would always sing around the house as she was cleaning or cooking. And I remember she would always sing The Lion Sleeps Tonight. We would listen to that one in the radio, in the car. And Stand By Me was another one that she would sing quite often as well. Also Say a Little Prayer by Aretha Franklin. I can just almost like imagine her, when she was dating my grandfather and getting ready and like singing that as she was like getting ready back when she lived in Paterson, New Jersey. So that That's another special song I would hear her sing, and also Mamma Mia too. She loved the movie, she loved the song, so probably Mamma Mia was another song that she sang. So those are some songs that are really special between me and my maternal grandmother, my Mimi. Um, I also grew up Catholic too, being from an Italian American family. So, Ave Maria was always a song that my mom wanted me to sing and hear. I sang that actually. The first funeral I ever sang was my Mimi's funeral. I was 15 years old. She passed away very early at the age of 66, and I sang Ave Maria. And at her funeral. And my mom always wants to hear me sing it. So one Mother's Day, I recorded it. Me and my best friend who plays violin, we recorded it and sent Ave Maria to our mothers. I think it was during the pandemic. So that song's very special. Um, my mother went to a Catholic school growing up, so she would always sing Salve Regina. So I always remember hearing my mom sing that. And also the Prayer of Saint Francis, that song as well. I always hear my mom singing that, and that was always just so meaningful for me and my family to go to mass growing up, like when I was in high school, and to hear my parents singing. Um, I think that is probably one of my most treasured memories. So hearing, I can always hear my mom. Um, yeah, I can always hear my mom singing that. And also Christmas Shoes, that song. My mom always has loved that song and she would always tear up. So whenever I hear that song, I think of my mother. Um, and some songs that are important to me about about mothers, not just the songs that I wrote. Japanese Breakfast, Michelle Zauner, she's part of this band called Japanese Breakfast, and one of her albums, especially when she started her artist band Japanese Breakfast. She had been part of other bands in the past. Oh, and yeah, Michelle Zauner had written a whole album about losing her mother to cancer. So that whole album is really meaningful for me to listen to, especially in a lot of ways, having lost my biological family, and not being in contact with them has been really therapeutic for me to listen to. Um, and also, there's a song by Mitski called Class of 2013 where she addresses her mom and asks her mom if she can stay at home like a little longer. So, yes, those are definitely some important songs in terms of either with me and my mother figures or with about mothers that are important to me.
All right, we're
There you go.
back. We're back.
Great. Yes, I wasn't sure. It said that it was still recording, but so I just kind of
Recording.
finished my answer and waited.
Okay. Yeah, it's my computer.
Oh, that's okay. Technology.
Hmm. Okay, so what were you saying?
Oh, I just even though I think that yeah, that you had left the recording, I just continued to because it was still recording. So I just went on to say about the songs that are important to either me that are about mothers, or important to like with my relationship, like with my grandmother or my mother. There's also another Korean folk song too. I sang it as a solo in Symphony Hall when I did the Massachusetts Music Educators Association, like all state choir festival. And I got this solo, and it's singing this Korean folk song. It's called Arirang, and it's kind of like, it's a very important song in Korea. And I sang it, and it was the first time I'd ever sung in Korean in my whole life. I was like 17. Um, and yeah, it talks about like the dear one who left me. May you not walk a few steps before your feet hurt. Like, it's like may you always remember that you abandoned me. And I think of my biological mother when I hear that song. I even use it as a counter melody, that melody in my song Sugar. And I use that as a counter melody that the violin plays because I think of, that tie to my biological Korean mother and our separation and that like abandonment and relinquishment that and not really knowing what happened in my adoption. So that's probably another meaningful song that I have with my biological mother. So yeah, those are my I think that's around 10 songs that I have.
Okay. Well, Jay, thank you so much for being here on the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And even though we got cut off, I'm just praying that this episode will upload a bit. So thank you so
Oh,
much for being here.
thank
Now,
you so much.
before we go, where can we follow you for any upcoming events? Where can we follow you on social media?
You can find me on social media at my Instagram handle, which is at jae.ci, which is also my artist name. You can find me on my website, jae-ci.com. That is my website. You can find me on Facebook at Jae Carelli, Jae Carelli. And you can find me on Spotify, Apple Music, all of the streaming platforms. Bandcamp, my album will be dropping on Bandcamp next Thursday at jae.ci. So you can find all of my music and more about like my adoption story and the work I do as a music teacher, a voice teacher, um, all on there.
Alrighty. Download all of the Mother's Day songs that we have talked about on this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. Visit iTunes.com, Spotify.com, or purchase a CD at Amazon.com. And make sure you follow Jae Carelli. Go to her website at jaec.com. That's jae-ci.com. Follow her on Instagram. Make sure you check out her new single called American
Amer-
Doll. The single is out right now on iTunes, and the album will be out on iTunes on May the 15th. And for those of you who live in the Boston area, make sure you check out her play, Homeward Bound, a Korean adoptee exploring the longing for the belonging. It'll be coming June 7th in Boston, Massachusetts. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to check out this episode, please subscribe by going to the link. The link is riverside.fm/studio/Samuel-Wilson Jr.'s. Don't forget to add the S at the end, -studio. And yes, I will be posting this episode on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if you have a hard time getting on to riverside.fm, then please become a member and subscribe to patreon.com/the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. And if you have a hard time getting on to Patreon, then don't forget we will be posting this episode on YouTube. Go to the YouTube homepage and make sure you type in the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. If you like this episode and if you like my podcast, please subscribe, support, give me a thumbs up, please leave a comment, and please pass it on. Thank you for joining me as I close out this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience. And happy Mother's Day, everybody. Well, that's about it for this edition of the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. I'm Sam Wilson Jr. Thank you for joining me. And please tune in next week for an all-new episode. The Black Soul Music Experience podcast is sponsored by the support of listeners like you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe by going to riverside.fm/studio/Samuel-Wilson Jr.'s studio. And don't forget to check out my audio podcast episodes by becoming a member and subscribe to patreon.com/the Black Soul Music Experience podcast. And also check out my video podcast episodes by subscribing to youtube.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. And please leave your comments, feedbacks, and replies by going to my Facebook homepage. Visit facebook.com/the Black Soul Music Experience Podcast. And you can also tweet me on X, aka Twitter, at Sam Wilson Jr. 66. As always, parting, remember this: reach for the top and your dreams will come true, and it can happen to you. From all of us, take care, God bless. Thanks for listening, have a good week, and please be safe.